Midnight tastes like static when you listen closely to a network. The fintech's dashboard blinks healthy greens, a lullaby of compliance, while somewhere between a browser and the cloud, a stranger holds a mirror to trust. A login page loads, pixels perfect, certificates valid, padlock smiling. Behind it, an invisible hand cups the stream and skims the cream. Device IDs user agents, fresh tokens still warm from the oven of authentication. No alarms, no explosions, only a soft approval tone on a phone that thinks it's helping. I've seen cages with thicker bars, I've seen locks with longer names, and yet it's always the same. An exception for convenience, a helper app, a travel flag, a tired human. Unbreakable is a story people tell themselves to sleep. Tonight, someone else writes the ending. The tip arrives like a whisper through a locked door. An inbox I keep just for ghosts and guilty consciences. The sender claims a fintech lost control without losing a single control. No malware, no phishing page you'd recognize, no brute force. Watch the consent, they write. Watch the help desk. I hit record, not because I believe them, but because stories like this rot when left unlit. The company's PR speaks in marble. Zero trust, least privilege, compliance badges like scout patches. But the logs, if I can pry them open, will show whether a trusted mirror stood between identity and its reflection. I pack batteries, blank notebooks, and the dull hope that comes before a hunt. If it's true, we're not tracking a break-in. We're tracking a guided tour. Security tours are theater, and Priya plays an honest lead. She walks me through identity perimeters and agent rollouts, policy engines that weigh posture like customs officers. She's proud, but not blind. I hear it in the questions she asks the air when no one answers. The map is beautiful. Micro-segmented lanes, conditional access at every junction. Data exfil watches that bark at gigabytes. Yet, beauty is not proof. Beauty is the shape of confidence before reality edits it. I keep my recorder low and my doubts high, looking for the small human seams, exceptions for executives, legacy drivers that just work, a vendor box that can't be patched because money never sleeps. We nod at the dashboard's green meadows and promise to check the soil. The email that triggers everything looks harmless in the way medicine cabinets look harmless. Travel compliance update, perfectly timed to the CFOA's itinerary. Hyperlinks stressed in official font. A chain forms. Click. Redirect. Prompt. But the mirror waits. A proxy that tapes itself between trust and trusted, letting the real site do all the work while keeping the keys. Elena sees a familiar ritual and moves briskly through it. A professional at her own security. Somewhere else, Spectre's console quietly populates. Headers aligning, cookies setting. A heartbeat of borrowed identity. No sirens because nothing new appears. The page is the page. Only the path it takes is crooked. That's the violence here. A theft so close to normal that the victim keeps holding the door. You'd think the network would scream when someone borrows a crown. Instead, it hums. Spectre routes through a residential proxy that matches a known neighborhood, sprinkles a device fingerprint tuned to Alana's real laptop, and lets the trusted stack nod him through. The EDR flashes healthy because the real endpoint is healthy. Only the conversation has been spliced. A known device beacon. A VIP traveling note. A help desk human who wants to help. The telemetry displays confidence the way a stage set displays a city. Walk behind it, and there's scaffolding. Tape. A hand-painted skyline. But the audience applauds the illusion. Because from their seat, it's perfect. Spectre doesn't break in. He gets shown his seat and handed a program. The first wobble is too polite to be called an alert. Maya spots it while skimming sign-in traces the way a musician hears a flat note in a chorus. The token's journey loops through an address that shouldn't be on the itinerary. Device ID? Perfect? Posture? Textbook? But the path takes a scenic route that only makes sense if someone is holding traffic cones just out of frame. Geovelocity tries to protest. 2 continents in a heartbeat. But conditional access shrugs because the user is traveling and the device is known. The dashboards purr their reassuring lullaby. And still, Maya's pencil taps faster. She drags Armand to the screen, overlays time slices, and the thread becomes a seam. If this is a mirror attack, the glass is polished enough to pass a cleanliness inspection. She tags the event, bookmarks the IP, and writes one word in the case file that always makes executives uncomfortable. Invisible. If stealing rivers gets you chased, siphoning mist gets you ignored. That's Kite's specialty. The app they register looks helpful. Calendar sync, meeting transcription, enterprise-friendly smiles. DLP yawns because the data flows are whisper-thin, always below the line where alarms have budgets. Auth consent screens do the heavy lifting. Bland copy. Crisp logos, scope requests phrased like chores. One click, and the cloud blesses the tap. Somewhere upstream, Spectre watches granted scopes ripple outward like a quiet tide. Read only here, metadata there, enough to label, sort, and assemble a buyer's guide to someone else's business. No malware. Nothing that breaks glass. Just polite requests answered by polite systems designed to say, yes. The genius isn't the code, it's the patience to live under thresholds. Never more than a sip. Never long enough to make a wave. Telemetries are only as honest as their drivers. Somewhere deep in the stack, a signed but shaky kernel driver opens a curtain the dashboards can't see through. The agent reports as cheerful as ever. Process checks green, heartbeat steady. Yet parts of Userland are now a stage with the house lights killed. Priya hates this kind of exposure. It's not a vulnerability you can point at in a slide. It's a blindfold you forget you're wearing. She and Jonas compare notes. The VIP build image includes an exception for a legacy peripheral. And that exception includes the driver. And that driver allows the EDR to be present but partially deaf. It's the kind of compromise that teams accept because the demos must run and the flight boards want wait. Priya drafts a blocklist proposal. Jonas winces at the compatibility fallout. Both know the adversary already counted on that hesitation. The push storms start at dinner. Just annoying enough to tap approve to make them stop. Elena resists, then calls the help desk, because that's what good policy says. Spectre's counting on that call. Jonas answers with the weariness of someone who solves human problems with system toggles. The record shows VIP, traveling, urgent meeting in 30. The policy has an exception for that constellation. A temporary bypass, only for a few hours. Feels like customer service. Meanwhile, Spectre sprinkles attempts until the window opens, then slides a real approval into a real flow. No phishing page to screenshot, no malware hash to paste into a report. After the call, Elena's phone quiets. The absence is the trick. Silence can look like safety when the danger stops asking permission and starts carrying a key. Armand doesn't chase alerts. He chases patterns. Consent logs tell stories that CM rules miss. A harmless app appears, gathers scopes that map influence and multiplies across users who never needed it, but trusted the brand. He layers timestamps and sees the birth of a shadow estate. Service principals with friendly names, tokens that never meet a human again, delegations that outlive passwords. Maya feeds him traces. He sketches a lineage tree where every node is a promise handed to a stranger. The elegance is almost insulting. No spikes, no drama, just growth. He marks a pivot day when travel notes help desk exceptions and new consents align like planets. If they can flip the telescope, instrument the contents, not the endpoints, they might turn the mirror back on the thief. For now, he writes a headline to steady his focus. Empire built on yes. It begins with a memo fit for a frame. A vendor. Banking update. Immaculate letterhead. Tidy grammar. Dates aligned with recent contract amendments, as if pulled from their own archives. It arrives in Elena's inbox with the soft authority of routine. The attachment clicks open into a PDF whose pixels match last month's statements down to the dust on the scanner glass. Priya reads it like a bomb tech reading a love note. No spelling slips, no foreign headers, no lazy phrasing. The only tell is timing. It rides the wake of travel, expense settlements, and a prior vendor email thread that was properly secured. Or so the thread insists. Elena cross-checks the account name. It matches. The routing number. New, but explained by a merger. In a world where fraud screams, this one hums. She schedules the change for end of week. Somewhere unseen, a routing table smiles. The voice is flawless because it isn't trying too hard. Elena calls accounts payable with the kind of fatigue that makes urgency sound polite. She apologizes for the late hour, mentions a board review, slides in the vendor name and the updated routing like it's housekeeping. Nobody wants to stay late for. Maya later scrubs the recording and hears nothing mechanical. Breaths in the right places. A throat clear when the room printer starts. Spectre and Kite curated it from interviews, webinars, a decade of stray audio. The model needed only a minute. It got 15. The target hesitates, then asks for a confirm email. Elena says it's already in the thread. The agent glances, sees it glowing there like a lighthouse they trust, and thanks her for staying on top of this. The call ends with gratitude, not suspicion. Doors don't slam when you walk out with the keys. Their SIM swap stalls on paperwork. The carrier wants in-person verification. Spectre doesn't curse. He pivots. On-call admin lines are built for kindness at 2 a.m. And Jonas is exactly the kind of professional who hates saying no more than he hates being wrong. The request is mundane. A password reset for a travel-locked VIP. Ticket already open. Callback number matching the HR file. Kite sprinkles verification crumbs. Office layout details, last meeting topics, all harvested from Slack exports and calendar metadata. Jonas follows policy, then bends it by a degree. Temporary reset. Force change on next login. Log the exception. It's the right decision in a world that still assumes people are the problem to be solved with convenience. Minutes later, a service principal consumes the change, not a person. The door never swung. The frame flexed just enough. The wire desk lives by choreography. Dual approval, callback validation, code words that change every quarter. Today, every step clicks like a metronome. The Treasury portal shows the vendor banking profile updated per policy. The approval token arrives from the CFO's enrolled device, the one the system believes is in her hand. The callback to Elena routes to a clean voicemail with exactly the right greeting. The return call lands from the correct number minutes later. Spectre's spoof passes attestation checks by leaning on the network's trust in its own. Signaling. Amount, memo reference. Each detail mirrors prior invoices with surgical precision. Armand watches the approvals like falling dominoes and feels the physics working against him. It's not that the controls failed. It's that they performed as designed for the wrong actor. The submit button depresses. Somewhere mixers spin up like turbines. Maya prefers traps that look like paperwork. She seeds canary documents, quarterlies with irresistible file names, vendor remittance templates pre-laced with unique DNS beacons, a private link that only curiosity opens. Each is tagged to a story. One for the calendar app, one for the meeting transcriber, one for the quiet service principal that never sleeps. Armand maps where each beacon should shout from if touched. A lattice across cloud storage, mailboxes, and a MISC folder that eats secrets. Hours later, the first ping arrives from a machine that doesn't belong to anyone in HR. Then, a second from a country no one is visiting. The pattern is a signature without a name. Damn's enough. They won't rip cords yet. They will pull thread. Maya smiles, not triumphantly, but with the careful relief of someone who finally found the wind. If Spectre trusts anything, it's convenience wrapped in legitimacy. So Priya and Maya build a gift that looks boring. A productivity helper with a corporate logo. A privacy policy written by someone who actually reads them. Scopes that feel modest, just enough to sync calendars and tidy file. Metadata. Armand writes copy that could pass any procurement sniff test and hosts it where real apps live, signed with a certificate that would make a CISO nod. The trap isn't the code. It's the narrative. An app that solves a nuisance Spectre has already created with his own siphon. When the consent request lands in the same sea of friendly apps he's been using as cover, he won't see teeth, only water. They wait through midnight's slow hour. Somewhere far from their screens, a new service principle flickers into life. The mirror stares back, and for the first time, blinks. Adversaries hide in motionless places. Armand begins where few bother. Comment threads on paste bins, throwaway gists with usernames that read like random oceans of consonants, and DNS names that resolve to nothing until the right string arrives. He maps dead drops by their habits, the hour they're updated, the syntax of the decoys, the stubborn reuse of a favorite misspelling. Spectre's crew trades locations the way couriers used to trade park benches. Each paste looks like junk until you tilt your head. Base 64 blocks interrupted by a line of poetry. An encryption salt disguised as a timestamp. Armand builds a resolver that pretends to be forgetful, then never forgets. One comment chain yields a pattern of handoffs threading through harmless places. Follow enough of them and the web stops being a tangle. It becomes a route, and roots can be waited on. The fortress's weakest stone isn't inside the wall. It's the contractor holding the spare keys. Jonas' MSP tool, starved by rushed patches and chained to customer uptime, is a side door built from good intentions. Spectre knows the inheritance model by heart. One console to bless many tenants. Priya and Maya mirror the tenant view, shaping telemetry into a funhouse that leaves Spectre seeing what they want him to see. Healthy agents, quiet networks, clean consent histories, while Armand captures the raw stream beneath. Jonas stares at the architecture that made sense when everything was honest and feels the old ache of convenience debt. They don't rip it out. They learn its rhythm. When Spectre pivots through the shared channel, the mirrored tenant feeds him staged calm, while his packets take a detour through instruments tuned to hear whispers. Inherited trust becomes inherited leverage. Hunting turns legal the moment you want to touch money or metal. Rafi arrives with the quiet gravity of process. Preservation letters drafted, jurisdiction charts pinned, and a sequence of warrants that must be threaded like beads before the bank cutoff slams shut. He doesn't care about the romance of the chase. He cares about admissibility and clock math. Armand walks him through the mirror, the consents, the MSP side door. Rafi translates it into paperwork each agency will understand, trimming jargon until only verbs remain. Obtained, controlled, transmitted. Priya balks at the delay, but Maya knows an arrest without a freeze is theater. They build a timeline with the precision of an air traffic controller, pairing legal windows to technical choke points. The plan isn't dramatic. Sinkhole here, revoke there, notify an exchange, file and file again. If it works, it will look like nothing happened. Spectre prides himself on reading rooms he can't see. Tonight, the room he watches is a puppet show. The mirrored tenant feeds him clean bills of health while the real telemetry funnels to Armand's recorder. He probes with tiny changes, altering a scope here, nudging a rule there. and each time the stage obliges with reassuring results. Beneath the floorboards, Priya's honey app tags his infrastructure. Maya's beacons trace his reach. Jonas' MSP logs timestamp every inherited permission. And Rafi's clock keeps beating toward the moment papers turn into orders. When Spectre finally stretches for a bigger sip, the plumbing is already rerouted. He thinks he's alone in a quiet museum. In truth, he's walking through an exhibit designed for him, every motion-lit plaque recording his steps. The Phantom is no longer a rumor. He is a silhouette, ready for a name. The darkest marketplaces don't shout. They whisper in shorthand only the hungry can hear. Armin and Maya find the listing under a seller who trades indoors, not data. Fintech tenant. Fresh session cookies. Device attested. Travel context. 48th TTL. Spectre didn't just steal access. He packaged it, priced it, and let the market confirm how unbreakable the brand looks from the outside. The post includes screenshots scrubbed to pass a quick glance. Tenant ID cropped, user initials blurred, but the shape of the truth still visible. Priya stares at the words. Device attested, like a personal insult. That phrase lives on her slides. Rafi notes the escrow address and the clock. Jonas recognizes the fingerprint of an MSP side enumeration. Armand takes it all in with the grim respect reserved for craftsmanship, because craft is what defeats controls. If an empire can be sold as a bundle of cookies, then sovereignty is just a session away from eviction. Every fortress keeps a velvet rope for important guests. Spectre found it and leaned. The VIP travel laptop image is clean by intention and compromised by design. Legacy driver allow lists to keep peripherals working on the road. A looser idle timeout to survive long-haul flights. And a conditional policy that trusts location signals pumped through predictable hotel networks. Priya traces the policy lineage and finds the board meeting memo that birthed it. Good faith ergonomics turned into a flaw. Maya overlays authentication maps with conference schedules. The coincidences align too precisely to ignore. Jonas admits the MSP template, cloned the exception for executive parity. No one meant harm, and that's the problem. The brand narrative demanded frictionless productivity. Zero trust became zero annoyance on alternate Tuesdays. Armin writes it plainly in his notes. Security died of 1,000 conveniences, each blessed by a calendar. The logs sing in perfect pitch, and that's the lie. Geolocation jitters smooth into plausible arcs. Device health lines up like a parade. SSO emits a chorus of known device and compliant posture. Yet the canary beacons tell a parallel story that doesn't rhyme. Spectre is poisoning signals upstream, forging inside the guardrail telemetry by replaying attested headers harvested at the mirror. Priya calls it a hall of mirrors problem. Every reflection looks valid because the first one was. Jonas traces an MSP agent heartbeat that never diverges, like a metronome keeping time for a counterfeit band. Maya layers raw DNs and TLS fingerprints over the CM's tidy narratives, and the melody cracks. One cipher suite out of place. One time, delta, too neat. Armand articulates the awful simplicity. The defenders are validating the performance, not the performers. When trust becomes a texture, counterfeiters become designers. Persistence doesn't roar. It lingers. Spectres foothold lives in places designed to be invisible. Long-lived tokens granted to service identities with names that sound like chores. Auth consents that never reprompt. Unattended automations that nobody wants to reboot because they make Monday easier. Maya inventories service principles and finds a genealogy of access older than anyone's memory. Priya drafts a rotation plan that reads like a field surgery schedule. Revoke, rotate, rebind, retest. Repeat until the patient remembers how to breathe unaided. Jonas warns of breakage. Rafi warns of evidence preservation. Armand warns of narrative fatigue when stakeholders ask, "Are we done?" And the only honest answer is, "We're closer." Somewhere, Spectre's console shows green until, silently, one of his long straws draws air. He switches to a backup, then another. For the first time, the mirrors reflect him back without a mask. Money moves faster than regret. The first wire fractures into hops that look like routine settlement. Domestic bank to payment processor. Processor to offshore correspondent, then into a constellation of mixers and exchanges that pride themselves on speed. Rafi's window for a freeze is not a day but an hour, maybe less, bounded by time zones and weekend rules that criminals read better than bankers. Armand feeds him hash lists and transaction notes. Maya signals to exchange contacts primed by preservation letters. Priya flips low-risk revocations high to force refresh under controlled watch. The progress bar is emotional theater. There is no bar, only calls, encounters, and the possibility of arriving exactly on time. When the first partial freeze confirmation arrives, no one cheers. They mark the saved tranche in quiet ink and stare at the remaining routes. The lesson is not victory. It's velocity. Sinkholing feels like fishing with invisible line. We see DNs with decoys and wait for Spectre's infrastructure to breathe in our direction. When it does, the map lights not as a spotlight but as a pulse, revealing rented servers hiding behind content networks and polite TELs. Maya watches the first beacon fold into our resolver, then a second from a pasted drop coordinate. Priya staggers timers, letting command channels believe they're healthy while routing their questions into jars. Rafi's forms turn pings into paper trails. Armand threads the narrative so the team won't mistake quiet for success. Spectre tests with low-risk pings, notices nothing, and returns to work. That's the trick. The better the catch, the calmer the water looks. When a control node finally queries our alias and answers back with schedule metadata, we know we're holding the string that moves the marionette. Now we pull smoothly, never sharply. When the strings are mapped, you cut them in an order that collapses the puppet without breaking the stage. Identity first. Maya drafts the kill script like a conductor calling sections. Revoke refresh tokens, rotate secrets on service principles, rebind automations to hardened apps, invalidate sessions at the IDP edge, force reattestation on VIP, builds starved of their legacy drivers. Priya rides herd on exceptions. None survive. But documents each break, so Monday's business won't blame Tuesday's fix. Jonas braces with rollback plans and quiet hotfixes for MSP tools that learned bad habits. Armand narrates the live decays as tokens go cold in Spectre's console. Rafi clocks the moment each revocation crosses a legal milestone. The effect is oddly serene. Dashboards remain green while the invisible scaffolding detaches. Somewhere else, a cursor flashes in an admin window, and then, mid-command, returns unauthorized. Silence, finally, with teeth. Money obeys rules until it doesn't. Today, we make the rules louder. Rafi's early preservation letters mature into flags across exchanges and processors. When Spectre's tranches hit the nets, compliance teams that usually arrive after the crime step forward during it. Maya feeds them hash paths and deposit addresses, pairing them with timing windows from the sinkhole diary. Elena joins for the first real breath she's had in days, authorizing rapid attestations and public statements to keep banks cooperative. Armand watches the flowcharts change color as corridors close mid-flight. We don't get everything. The first hops are already gone, but a fat vein stalls, accounts marked pending verification. Spectre splits the stream into new wallets, testing whether our reach is procedural theater. It isn't. One by one, destinations refuse the arrival. This is what defense feels like at speed. Not triumph, but drag. applied exactly where it hurts. Disclosure day is theater with a duty. Priya scripts the facts. Rafi guards the verbs. Elena carries the weight. Cameras swivel toward numbers the public will remember and acronyms they want. Arman sets his recorder by the press riser and times breaths between statements. What we know, what we've contained, what we've learned. No one says, Unbreakable. Instead, Elena names the exception culture that opened the door, the identity resets that closed it, and the partners who froze the money that could be. Questions try to catch her in contradiction. She refuses to play. Maya releases indicators and hardening guides in parallel. The part of disclosure that matters after the quotes are picked clean. When the lights die, the building exhales. The wound isn't healed, but it's clean, stitched with visible thread, so others might copy the pattern instead of the pain. Night returns the sock to its natural volume, a low tide of fans, a metronome of heartbeats from racks. Maya exports the last wave of indicators with the care of labeling vials, hashes, domains, certificates with fingerprints too pretty to forget. Arman writes the lesson in plain words, meant to survive a boardroom and a classroom. Resilience is choreography, not a product. Exceptions compound. Identity is both door and guard. Priya schedules the architectural work no one applauds. Killing bypasses, codifying, no burning down legacy drivers. Rafi files the final notices that turn a freeze into a seizure. For the first time, the case has gravity without panic. Spectre isn't gone. Thieves don't retire when a mark fights back. But the mirrors are broken, the strings are cut, and the stage is hours long enough to build one with fewer trapdoors. Lights dim. Logs roll. On to the next hunt. Autopsies don't begin with blame. They begin with anatomy. We lay the breach on the table and trace nerves, back to choices that looked reasonable at the time. Identity wasn't a badge clipped to a belt. It was a bloodstream carrying permission to every organ. The proxy didn't counterfeit anything dramatic. No smashed glass. No rogue binaries. It captured the pulse of trust and replayed it with a steady drummer's hand. Known device became a lullaby. VIP travel a sleeping pill. Temporary exception. A recurring prescription renewed by polite systems. Our controls were not wrong. They were pointed at the wrong questions. We certified performance. Pages loaded, prompts approved, agents alive, while refusing to ask who was holding the mirror. The autopsy's lesson is simple and cruel. If the first reflection is trusted without challenge, every reflection after it becomes a fact. And facts can be weaponized. Remedies must fit the wound, not the press release. We start with the gates. Phishing-resistant authentication everywhere. No carve-outs. Hardware-backed challenges replace pushes that beg to be spam. Device trust becomes proof, not a sticker. Measured boot attestation, driver block lists that refuse nostalgia, and tamper protection welded shut. Next, the shadows. Auth governance with human-owned scopes separate from machine-owned scopes, consent expirations that rot like fruit, and automated diffing that screams when an app grows new teeth. Finally, the invisibles. Telemetry validated at the origin, not only at the agent. DNS and TLS fingerprints weighted alongside posture so a forged smile cannot pass for identity. None of this is glamorous. It breaks calendars and bruises workflows. But resilience is built where patience meets principle, in the refusal to trade today's comfort for tomorrow's ransom. Technology hardens fast. People harden slowly, then only with practice. The help desk now works like air traffic control. No resets without verified callbacks to numbers pulled from HR at rest. Not links in tickets. No VIP bypass. Only VIP scrutiny. Deepfake friction becomes muscle memory. Challenge phrases that change weekly. Scheduled video callbacks with randomized cues. Background checks that verify environments, not voices. Finance adopts ritual as armor. Dual control over vendor. Changes with out-of-band confirmations to known payees, and a mandatory cooling period that makes urgency suffocate on contact. We rehearse. Not a tabletop for applause, but drills that fail until they don't. Culture always writes the firmware for process. If the news story is that convenience kills, then the new habit is to slow down exactly where thieves speed up. That's not paranoia. It's choreography. Architecture is where philosophy becomes plumbing. We delete the exception that started the rot and salt the earth where it lived. Least privilege stops being a slide and becomes a budget. Permissions cost and teams must renew them like leases, with inspections. Vendor trust shifts from inheritance to escrow. MSP channels gain conditional access as strict as any employee, with per-tenant just-in-time elevation that expires whether anyone remembers or not. Network segmentation seeds the stage to identity segmentation. Each automation owns only its single purpose, and every purpose is bound to a proof. We map every path that could carry money and bolt on circuit breakers that trip under pressure. None of this kills business. It kills ambiguity. Ambiguity is how mirrors win. We build angles, not reflections. There is no unbreakable. There is only what we choose to make hard, and whether we keep choosing when the calendar aches. We didn't win because our tools were prettier. We prevailed because we changed which questions our systems asked and which answers our people trusted. The mirror will return wearing a new frame. Different headers, different markets, a fresh story about convenience. Spectre is just one actor in a theater that never closes, but this company now knows its lines. Challenge the first reflection, price every exception, measure identity like a substance, not a slogan, and turn speed into something the defender owns. I stopped the recorder, not because the case is over, but because the lesson is ready. Unbreakable was marketing. Practice is policy you can feel. Small frictions daily, applied exactly where thieves prefer you to glide.